Welcome back as we continue our focus around seeking greener pastures, and this time we are looking at immigration specifically. We've packed up your life. You've spent a considerable amount of time now living abroad. The next big step is to make it official and make that country your new home. What are the consequences for your South African citizenship? Well, Stephanie Dasauri Darbandi, a specialist in South African immigration and South African citizenship law, is going to join us to open a can of worms. Stephanie, you must be used to people being supercharged when they connect to you, because this is kind of where life gets real.
That's right.
It's a big thing.
It's not, the topic is not exciting as the rugby, but it's one that must be had. So
I think a lot of people are reconsidering their UK citizenship now. Maybe I can start with this. When you are considering moving abroad, okay, and you've spent a lot of time abroad, what should South Africans be considering when taking that major step of relocating to another country?
there are a number of things, there are a number of factors that must be considered, but one is the issue of passport expiring as a South African. Applying for a South African passport abroad or renewing a South African passport abroad is not a straightforward process. I think anybody that's been through it will tell you it can take 6 months to a year.
Doing it in South Africa is not a simple process, so I would imagine doing it abroad is
worse,
even
yeah.
difficult.
Foreign missions have limited authority and they can't process passports locally. So they send it to Pretoria by diplomatic bag, which is not a speedy process or efficient. There's no track or trace system. So it's not easy. That's one thing to consider. And then if you plan on taking up a foreign citizenship, you have to decide, well, do I want to retain my South African citizenship?
How can you lose that? What is the scenario moving forward? Can you have both if you do move abroad? Can you keep it, and how does that look?
You can. So South Africa allows dual and multiple nationalities.
Okay.
But the one way of losing your, or not losing, you can renounce your South African citizenship officially, and some people do, very few. The most common way is an automatic loss, which is currently being challenged. In fact, it was challenged by the Democratic Alliance, and they won. We're just waiting for the Constitutional Court to confirm the order. But if once the Constitutional Court confirms the order, it makes no difference, and people can apply for foreign citizenship without first applying for retention.
Okay.
But until that's done, you have to apply to Home Affairs for a letter allowing you to take up the foreign citizenship if you're an adult and if you're applying for the citizenship by naturalization.
If you want to come back, how do you then start that process? How do you do that? Do you have to come back and then start the process here? Can you start it abroad?
So if you've retained your South African status, it's as simple as just returning on a South African passport. One thing to remember is that an adult South African must exit and enter South Africa on a South African passport. Must. It's a criminal offense not to.
Really?
Yes, and a lot of people don't know that.
I was going to say, because you don't really, it's not something, we do a lot of traveling back and forth. My wife's from the UK, we're in this kind of citizenship kind of maelstrom at the moment, and that's something that I really didn't know. Documentation and keeping the right documents, I've learned this through even unabridged birth certificates, getting that sort of stuff is really important.
It is.
How important and why?
It's very important. So if you were born in the last 10, 15 years, you probably would have an unabridged birth certificate. But prior to that, they were issuing abridged. No, exactly. You were getting abridged birth certificates which confirm nothing more than your birth and your name. So an unabridged birth certificate is something everybody should apply for, and I would suggest applying now when you don't need it, because it could take a year.
Yeah, I was told up to a year. Didn't take that
long. A year or longer. So birth certificates, passport documents that are valid, identity documents. My advice to South Africans is usually to travel to South Africa. South Africans living abroad. Okay. Travel to South Africa, apply for your passport here, and leave on your passport. Don't deal with the foreign mission. Okay. Some South Africans that have dual nationality will apply for a passport abroad, wait 6 months, travel on their foreign passport, and then it just creates a whole lot of problems.
A whole can of worms. All of this being said, it sounds like you need someone in your corner if you're going to be tackling these things, and there are various agencies and people out there, and you represent what looks like someone who is very much connected to the inner workings, and I think that's the problem here, is we sit 2 or 3 people away from the people who affect the outcomes here. You have a direct line. What services do you offer, and do you have advice for South Africans looking to connect with you that are currently going through this?
So I've been doing this for 16 years. Wow. And we practice exclusively in South African immigration and citizenship law, so it's all we do every day, all day. And I think it's important for people to get the proper advice, to do the proper research. We assist in anything that has to do with the South African Citizenship Act or the South African immigration law. So anything to do with foreigners coming to South Africa, South Africans wanting to, or South Africans that have lost their status, want to retain their status. And it's important to get the proper advice because, as you said earlier, it affects the way you live.
Oh,
it
for
affects
sure.
everything. So it's something you want to do properly.
Well, it's the most fundamental big question in our lives right now. And I would imagine it's affecting a lot of people with South Africa being this kind of globally connected little place that we are. Thank you so much for doing the work that you do and knowing everything that you do and fighting the good fight on behalf of the people who desperately need it. Because it's a fight, yo. It is a fight. It's not to say, though, that it must make you fearful of connecting to that greater diaspora, getting out there, flying the South African flag in places amazing as Italy. Maybe this will get you excited.